Welcome back to the Faith Affirming Findings podcast.
Welcome to Faith Affirming Findings, a podcast dedicated to sharing with you
the incredible discoveries from the field of biblical archaeology.
These findings will strengthen your faith, affirm the historicity of Scripture, and provide you with unique insights into the culture and background of the Bible.
Now, here is your host, Associate Professor of Bible Exposition at Dallas Theological Seminary,
Dr. Paul Weaver.
Today, I am recording this podcast from Washington, D.C., where I have been teaching an intensive course on Hebrews and the general epistles here at Dallas Theological Seminary's extension site. If you live in the Washington, D.C. area, I'd encourage you to consider enrolling as a student and furthering your preparation for a lifetime of ministry to which we are all called. Now, to today's faith-affirming finding. In last week's podcast, I shared with you about an archaeological discovery that silenced the critics, that being the Nabonidus cylinder. It affirmed the reality of the historical character recorded in the Bible known as Belshazzar. Now, in this week's podcast, I'll share with you about another discovery named after Nabonidus, specifically the Nabonidus Chronicle. And I'll share how it not only affirmed the historical reliability of Scripture, but unlocked what was once a mystery to so many Bible scholars. Your time is precious, so let's jump right in to today's faith-affirming finding. You'll remember that Daniel chapter 5 records the feast of Belshazzar. Belshazzar has this feast which he invites 1,000 of his nobles. And at this feast, Belshazzar makes a very bad decision. He pulls out the temple vessels from the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem, the very same vessels that his ancestor Nebuchadnezzar had previously taken from the Jewish temple in 605 BC. It is after having desecrated these vessels in an act of defiance against Yahweh that a hand appears out of nowhere. And this hand writes three Aramaic words on the wall. These Aramaic words are Mene, Tekel, and Peres. The arrogant, self-confident Belshazzar instantly becomes a coward. He becomes so fearful that the translation of the text from Daniel 5:6 reads, "His knees start knocking together." Belshazzar is baffled by these three words and being uncertain what these three words meant, but certain that the gods were trying to communicate something to him. Belshazzar declares that whoever can interpret these three words, he would make that person third in power over the Babylonian Kingdom. This promise is made in Daniel chapter 5, verse 7, and I'm reading, "The king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, 'Any man who can read this inscription and explain this interpretation to me shall be clothed with purple and have a necklace of gold around his neck and have authority as third ruler in the kingdom.'" The same promise is then again repeated in Daniel chapter 5, verse 16. And then once again, Daniel, after he correctly interprets the three words, and in essence tells Belshazzar that God is going to cause his kingdom to fall, Belshazzar keeps his promise. The text says in Daniel chapter 5, verse 29, "Then Belshazzar gave orders, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a necklace of gold around his neck, and issued a proclamation concerning him that he now had authority as the third ruler in the kingdom." Now, for years, Jews and Christians alike believed this account to be true, but not fully understanding why. In other words, Bible scholars and translators were left scratching their heads, wondering why Daniel would be offered the third place in power over the kingdom rather than the second place. Those of us who believe the Bible is inspired and inerrant accepted this description by faith, which is the right thing to do. But we did not fully understand why Belshazzar offered the third position of power. However, the Nabonidus Chronicle helps us to understand why it was so. The Nabonidus Chronicle is a tablet written in cuneiform script, which was an ancient system of writing invented by the Sumerians. This chronicle does just that. It chronicles or records a summary of the main events that occurred during the reign of Nabonidus, beginning in 556. The Nabonidus Chronicle, like the Nabonidus Cylinder that we discussed on last week's program, not only affirms the historical character of Belshazzar, again, silencing the critics who said Belshazzar was a fictitious character, but it also explains why Belshazzar offered and eventually gave Daniel the third position of power in the empire. The Nabonidus Chronicle informs us that Nabonidus spent 10 years living in Arabia and left his son, his son Belshazzar, in charge of Babylonia. So, Belshazzar offered Daniel the third place in power because Nabonidus had the first place in power. His son Belshazzar was the second person in power, and so Belshazzar offers Daniel the third place of power. Pretty cool stuff, huh? Today, you can view the Nabonidus Chronicle in the British Museum in London. So, in summary, this is a faith-affirming finding because, first, it silences the critics and affirms the biblical record, but second, it also provides Bible expositors additional help in making sense of a couple verses in Daniel's prophetic book that have baffled conservative scholars for so long. If you've enjoyed today's faith-affirming finding, please make sure to click the like button, click the subscribe button, and leave us a question or a comment that will help our podcast become more visible to others. And if you're enjoying this podcast, you may also enjoy my other podcast entitled Bible and Theology Matters. That's Bible and Theology Matters. It's a 30-minute conversation with Bible scholars and Bible expositors about all things Bible and theology. Well, in next week's Faith Affirming Findings podcast, I'll share about an artifact discovered at Tel Dan. You won't want to miss it. And that is your Faith Affirming Finding for the week.
Faith Affirming Findings podcast is a listener-supported podcast devoted to affirming your faith in the reliability of Scripture and illuminating your understanding of Scripture.
If you would like to help sponsor the Faith Affirming Finding podcast,
You can make a tax-deductible donation of any amount, large or small,
at faithaffirmingfindings.com. That's faithaffirmingfindings.com and click on the Give tab.
We hope you'll join us again next week for another exciting Faith Affirming Finding.